Good evening, everyone. Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits here. Welcome to our St. Patrick's Day Wednesday night beer tasting. I'm joined as always by Aaron. Thank you for joining us, Aaron.
Hello.
Going to be fun. Now, this is a little bit of two tastings in one. We're going to explore a little bit of the low alcohol category and how important it's becoming these days. And we will begrudgingly talk a little bit about low calorie and no calorie beers. And then we will talk a little bit about Love Shack. So, let's start talking about the low and no alcohol category. Now, 10 years ago, this would be a category we could completely safely ignore. But since, I believe, between 2012 and 2018, the entire low and no alcohol beer category jumped 50%. And then in 2019 and 2020 alone, each of those years, it grew a further 30. Now, after all that growth, it's still under 2% of the total beer category, but that's still a pretty big chunk. And it's been growing for a while, and it's really starting to explode in 2021. The low alcohol styles are definitely part of it, and let's all begin by getting the Snake Lake Drink Easy Low Alcohol S IPA, which, way too many words on the front of the can, Snake Lake. Drink Easy Low Cal S IPA with monk fruit. I guess it could have been spelled out as Session India Pale Ale, but still. So, we are seeing an absolute explosion in the alcohol-free category this year. Dogfish Head is coming out with one. Brooklyn is coming out with them. Everybody seems to be coming out with a brand new low-cal or low-alcohol IPA or low-alcohol stout or something just a little bit different. And that's coming out of two places. One, the category's been blowing up for quite a while. And for two, I don't know about you, but I've noticed there's been a little more day drinking going on with COVID. And that's something that kept coming up in our... What do you got, Aaron?
We're still stuck on this screen. Looks like it's rolling then.
Are we rolling?
Yep.
Do we want to try this again?
Yeah, it looks like it's working.
Are we back?
Yep.
So should I just go?
Keep going.
All right.
Sorry about that.
I don't know who has seen what. Sorry, apparently we lost the feed, got the feed back.
Yeah, I don't have it here, but that's okay. It looks like it's working here.
But if we don't have it and we can't see it. If anyone's in the comments wants to throw us a bone and let us know if they can see anything, let us know, please.
I'm just getting this.
Live video interrupted. Okay, do you want to just cancel and restart it? Oh, feed worked the whole time here. Okay. Thank you so much, Tyler. I really appreciate you because we can't see it on our end. All right, good. Apparently it's working. Okay, so, wow, I got a little bit thrown off track there. So, with everybody jumping into this category and with the rise of people just wanting something a little lower alcohol, a lot of breweries are starting to throw their hats into the ring. Cut out when I started talking about day drinking low-cal beer, and now it's working. Okay, good. So out of that, we ended up with this situation where breweries were really trying to jump into this category, but it's not that easy to do. When a lot of the first low-cal and low-alcohol beers started rolling into the market, they were just saying, okay, well, we're going to take our regular IPA and let's just take some barley out of it. And we saw some success with that. I mean, we saw, IPAs go from 7 to 8% strong beers, and they slowly got dialed down to what we now think of as kind of that 5.5 to 6.5% alcohol category, with things like Afternoon Delight by Establishment, 88 Night Gallery. This is something that's been really done with great success. And I really like this new lower alcohol IPA style that's kind of come out. I've seen a lot of double IPAs these days actually canned at 8% alcohol, whereas double IPAs used to start at 10. Now, at the extreme opposite end of that, it's not enough to simply take some barley out to make a slightly lighter version of your existing beers. It's absolutely required to actually take the base recipe and start completely from scratch and build it up from the ground. And there's a lot of different little ways we can cheat your way into that. Let's jump into the Drink Easy here, and we'll talk about some of those. Apparently the YouTube stream is working, but not Facebook. We are not sure why. Everything seems to be fine. Facebook is now working? Okay.
Well, it's for somebody. It's working for me now. So.
Okay, well, it's working for Aaron now, which is a plus. It's still not working for me, if that matters. Okay. Ooh. You know, I wasn't expecting to like this quite that much, but I really like this. Okay, so while Aaron works on technical side, let's just kind of jump through these. The Drink Easy IPA, one thing I haven't brought up on here is that it's brewed with monk fruit. And this was a conversation I actually had with Amanda from Snake Lake this afternoon. Like, what is a monk fruit? Why is it in here? I mean, we have the 88 Passionfruit IPA. I mean, that's pretty obvious. They add the passion fruit so the beer tastes like passion fruit. Not so here with the monk fruit. Monk fruit is rather like stevia or like some of your other natural kind of low calorie, low carb or zero carb sweeteners. It's being added here simply to give a little more sweetness, a little more body, a little more richness without the alcohol. Now, if you've been paying attention to our wine tastings, I always say that alcohol is kind of your best friend and your worst enemy when it comes particularly to red wines. When you add more alcohol to a wine, the wine tastes richer. It tastes actually more viscous. The fruit seems a little fruitier and brighter. The wine seems to have fuller body. It seems to just taste more expensive. And that goes up and up and up, right to the point where you perceive the astringency of the alcohol or it tastes slightly medicinal, at which point the whole illusion falls away and the wine just completely collapses in on itself. Different conversation for a different day. People's ability to perceive alcohol in wine has actually started to ramp up, so we're actually seeing wine alcohols coming down. Now, on the beer side, when you're making a beer and you don't have that much alcohol, you're really missing body, you're missing richness, you're missing the ability for it to just taste like a beer, not like beer-flavored sparkling water. And I think that's a trap that a lot of the early low-cal and low alcohol beers fell into. I'm talking about beers like Molson 67, Michelob Ultra, and some of the early precursors to this category really was not working for a lot of people. So how do you introduce that illusion of this beer being stronger than it is? How do you add the illusion of body? And now it's a complete mystery because some people have Facebook and some people don't, and no one knows why. So that's fun. That's something for Aaron and I to work on after the broadcast to sort out what the heck happened. So what are they doing here? Now, we're going to set aside the fact that, and this is the big elephant in the room, I'm talking about all these brewing challenges. Well, these are brewing challenges for North American breweries. Especially kind of people who've just come out, say, in Alberta since 2015, because, you know, they've come into a market where, yes, big flavor, more hops, more sour, more dark, and if you're making it dark, throw it in a bourbon barrel, dial up the alcohol to 12, just make everything as big and as extreme as you can. When beers that, you know, really favored subtlety and a very careful approach to brewing them, it's very easy to make a giant imperial stout as opposed to a Pilsner because there's fewer places to hide. That's doubly true with low alcohol beers. Complicate with the fact where you're basically adding little fun quirks and gimmicks to make the beer taste bigger. So what are some of these? Yeah, we have no idea. John, if you can't see the video, try the YouTube stream. Aaron, could you throw a link to the YouTube stream directly in the Facebook chat for me? Thank you very much. So these conceits, these cheats, what are they? Well, the one that I didn't think of, but one that I actually read a whole lot about, is our old friend Decoction Mashing. So when we take a beer and we're basically brewing it in, what we do is we grind the barley and then we add in warm water and we basically rest that together. This is called the mashing in step. And what you're doing is you're allowing the alpha and beta amylase proteins to activate and to break down some of those simple sugars in the beer, or some of the complex starches in the actual grain, and turn them into simple sugars that will actually ferment. Now, if you do that all in one step or in one big pot, you end up with, you know, a very stable, predictable, classic way to make it. And if you're making a beer at 5.5%, 6% alcohol or more, absolutely no reason not to do that. But we now understand things like what an alpha and beta amylase is and how mashing in broadly works. But if you go back historically, people didn't understand that, and they certainly didn't have the ability to digitally control the temperature of their mash using like a heating coil. So what they would do is they would actually take out a portion of the mash, between a quarter and a third. They would take that out, they would boil it, and then they would add it back. And they'd take out another third and boil that and add that back. That did two things. One, it caramelized the sugars in the beer. It changed the nature of the actual wort itself. And then the other thing that did is it slowly stepped up the temperature over time. So you did get that big, thorough mash. When you're decoction mashing now, you can actually add body, richness, a little bit of sweetness, and actually like a real perception of body by going through that decoction mashing. If you really want to see what decoction mashing can be done in terms of a higher alcohol beer, the Tail Gunner Pilsner still does a traditional decoction mashing, and for my money is still the best Pilsner on the market, with one caveat that's just going. So other ways you can do it, you can use oats. Oats are a really nice, just easy, cheap thing that you can throw in. We are on the drink easy, Jacqueline. And I apologize again in advance for all the tech issues. This has not been fun for me either. So oats adds a perception of body, it adds a perception of richness, it adds some oiliness, it adds some weight. And then the last is things like the monk fruit here. Monk fruit has no calories, it has very, very low appreciable calories, it has no carbohydrates, but it does add some sweetness and it adds some fruitiness here, and it's changing the dynamic of the beer. Now the beer here is at 3.9%, so we're only 1 point less than like a Bud Light, but we're still getting into much bigger flavors than you get from a Bud Light. And the other thing I really noticed, this has the mouthfeel and the feeling of a real beer. Now, I've been around for a while doing not just beer tastings like this, but just enjoying beer myself. And I've had some beers come in at 2.5%, 3% alcohol, particularly from North America. We get them in your mouth, it's just, this is hop water. Like, yes, I like the aroma, it smells like an IPA. You get it in your mouth and it just disappears. It tastes like somebody made a White Claw but added hops to it. It's really not very interesting. Whereas with this, we get a little more perception of body and richness, and how you come about to that is really different. We're getting flavor from Bud Light, not flavors I want to drink. The S in SIPA means session, in this case, incredibly session. They're using Citra and Mosaic, which is, I'm coming to find, okay, so I had this conversation actually with Nigel earlier this week. I was going to say either early this week or late last week. It was earlier this week. I used to think I couldn't taste Mosaic. There's a certain family of hops like Equinox and some of the new hybrid hops that I can't taste. It's just like my wife can't taste cilantro. For some people, they just can't taste them. I thought that was the case for Mosaic and me. No, turns out the first few Mosaic beers I had were just really badly made beers, and I actually love Mosaic. So is this the equal of like, Cabin Super Saturation New England IPA? No. But it's also 110 calories, and it's 3.9%. I think they absolutely nailed this. In talking to Amanda about this, they're talking about making this one of their core beers now because it's done so incredibly well for them. And I think that really speaks to the fact that this is such a strong emerging category. There's also a really fun thing that's coming out. I spent a lot of time reading for this, and there's apparently a big 2% beer revolution happening in craft beers in the United States, where they're all trying to hit a craft beer at exactly 2% that tastes indistinguishable from some of your high alcohol stuff. There we go.
Personally,
John's got the YouTube.
I've never. Can you hear me?
Hopefully.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go.
So, dry February.
Yeah.
Of course, I was obligated to try a few, no or very, very low alcohol beers.
Yep.
And if I was doing like a 3, like the policies pretty much stay, dry. But I would try something like this just to kind of like, see what's up.
February.
I definitely I like the alcohol flavor in my beer. You know what I mean? And so even tasting this, like, it's still missing a lot of that. Like, there's a real, like, kind of evil, that boozy evilness, like, is totally missing from it. And that's why I obviously tend to kind of, like, stray away from, like, lower alcohol beers. But But it's good. It's tasty. It
Yep.
sure goes down quick.
It does go down really quick.
Yeah.
I have noticed we've kind of, I mean, it is a smaller can, but we've basically killed this thing in 10 minutes,
Yeah.
which is pretty good.
Sure.
Good thing it's 3.9%.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. I mean, you definitely will notice, and when we, like, I'm leaving a little bit in this can because I would like to try and go back to it after the Love Shack. And I don't know if we're going to be able to. If we can at all, I think that's a huge victory for it. But I will say that drink's better than 3.9%. So I put that caveat out there
Yeah.
that that the UK has still kept this tradition of brewing super low alcohol beers, particularly with two different styles, and those are milds and they're blonde ales. And blonde ales there means something a little bit different than they do here. Blonde ales there tend to be very, very low alcohol, always under 4%. They tend to be big, flavorful, hoppy beers, very much like this, but maybe a little less sweetness. Whereas milds have a fascinating history. Milds are a style I really enjoy, but do not have a particularly strong track record of being able to sell in this city. Now, milds can be anywhere from as dark as this to as pale as that. A mild, at one point in history, was not a beer that was actually brewed from the ground up. A mild was most often a second runnings beer. So you'd make your big, strong porter or IPA at 7.5% alcohol. You'd mash it through, you'd rinse it with your sparge water to draw off a little more sugar, and then you'd take that wort off and you'd boil it and you'd make your beer. But if you added another pound of barley or 2 pounds of barley on a home brewing kit, probably more than that on a big commercial brewery, you could actually just kind of top up the grain with a little bit of fresh crushed grain, and then all those expensive coloring malts and everything else that had been used to make the beer, you could then just run water through that again and actually get what's called a second runnings beer. And that's where a lot of your old historical milds came from. I've had a couple of recreations, second runnings beers. I've never seen them in Alberta, but I have had a second runnings mild before a couple of times. They tend to have a mildly astringent character. Like, you can tell they're pushing the barley a little too hard. It kind of has this almost unpleasant bran character to it. I really don't know how to describe it other than the fact that you can tell the barley's over, you've taken too much out of the barley. This, on the other hand, this was actually the 3rd anniversary beer for Snake Lake. It just came out. And for this, they wanted something in that British tradition of a great low alcohol beer, big on flavor, and a little bit different. Because, I mean, I will say, with the exception of the Village Local here, which is a non-alcoholic stout, most of the low alcohol beers that we've had come through have either been things like the Bluer Light here, which is by Brewing. This is actually a really cool beer, which is basically a blonde ale. And then the Dilettante by Durham, which is coming in at 3.5, and that's just like the Drink Easy. That's very much just an IPA with less alcohol. But milds can be very, very dark, and this is kind of a mild porter. So we get those big, dark, chocolatey notes, but again, without the alcohol. What happened to my favorite glass? It's still fine. No one has broken it yet, probably. So we're still good.
Oh, I just chimed in there.
What's that?
I almost broke it last week.
Oh.
You almost broke it last week? Okay, it has apparently survived a close call, but it is still fine. Why am I using this glass? Because we're going to be doing the two Love Shack beers side by side. So I'm going to go with the New Belgium. And yeah, this is absolutely delicious. I got to taste this, and I was like, well, I have to do something about this. And my big question was really, do I do like a super low alcohol week and I work in this and maybe the Bluer Light, maybe the Dilettante, and just kind of, or maybe even, dare I say, a zero alcohol beer and build a topic around that? Well, no, because I really wanted to talk about Love Shack. And then I was looking at those, it's like, well, what else is coming out right now in a fruity IPA? I really want to do that. But there really wasn't anything else that was coming out right now in a fruited IPA, and I still really wanted to do this. So it kind of ended up being a bit of two tastings in one. But yes, like, how do you get such a low alcohol beer at 3.4 that is this much flavor, this much richness? This one I might say, like Aaron, okay, yes, I miss the alcohol here. Mm-hmm. This one I really don't, and it's even a half point lighter. This I would just drink on its own because it's an awesome beer. This one, I love you, Snake Lake. I'm glad it's a huge hit for you, but I do kind of think the big selling point for me would be 110 calories per can. This it could be a whole lot of calories again, and it probably is. It's beer. It's never good for you. But I really love just this beer on its own merits. And I don't feel remotely guilty by having a little more because, you know, it's 3.4%. Looks like we broadly have the tech issues sorted out-ish. Still isn't working for me, mind, but it's working for you, so.
You have the comments, though.
I have the comments. I don't have any video, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's what mine was doing.
Yeah, I don't know.
And probably John's, too.
Probably John's, too. It's just stuck on the promo screen.
Facebook, or...
Well, the comments were working. I just got closed bracket, so maybe the comments are not working. We may have spoke too soon. Or maybe 3.4% is just way too much for Jackie. All right, so that concludes the first half. Now let's jump into Love Shack. Now these are two beers made by it's the same recipe, it's the same alcoholic strength, it's the same base everything, just brewed on slightly different equipment, and with slightly different, I believe they were allowed to use their own house yeast, so I believe the yeast on these may be different. I actually was at 88 and Cabin yesterday, could not get a straight answer out of either of them about exactly how the beers were different. So I'm going to have my Cabin in my right hand. And I'm also glad I chose not to do 0% beer. I don't think that would have been a big hit. Maybe one day, but you know, we'll also have 0 viewers, so it'll be a double 0 tasting. Also, thank you to all of you who came out on St. Patrick's Day for us. This has not been the world's best-selling beer tasting we've ever done. So, yeah, Love Shack time. Okay, so Cabin versus 88. Now, I will say I do still have both available for sale, sort of. I still have cans and can still get cans from Cabin. 88's been sold out for almost 3 weeks, so I'm completely out of cans, but we do still have growlers of this. Now, I will preface, everything, I've never had the two side by side. I've had them both individually on their own, but never side by side. In terms of customer sales, the 88 was hands down the winner. Most of my staff said they liked the 88 better, but I have had a couple of people who bought both come in and be like, no, the Cabin was clearly the best. I don't know what all these people are talking about with 88. So we've had some conflicting opinions here. I will note, they smell shockingly different. I get way more citrus and pine and like more traditional IPA things out of the Cabin, whereas I get way more tangerine and kind of more, I don't know, classically hazy IPA stone fruity things out of the 88. This is a gross oversimplification, but the Cabin smells a little more West Coast and the 88 a little more East. And yeah, like I was saying, Chris, getting exact details of how they differed was a little bit like pulling teeth at both 88 and Cabin. But yes, as far as I can tell, they're the exact same recipe, just brewed on different equipment by different people, and possibly with different yeasts. Now, in terms of that difference, they would have slightly different brewing kettles. They might source their base pale malt from slightly different places. I know, for example, with this, Snake Lake went with entirely British, like imported grains to actually make this work. They may pull their barley from slightly different sources. They may pull their hops from slightly different sources. Just because, let's say, they're both made with Citra, one might get their Citra from one farm, one might get their Citra from another. One might use whole hops, one might use hop pellets. So the same recipe, just through a slightly different lens. And yeah, they're surprisingly different. Okay. All the fruit is there. Like, I don't know if I'll really say passion fruit distinctly, but definitely peach, definitely mango, everything kind of under that tropical fruit heading. It tastes with the Cabin like shockingly different than it smells. Like when I stick my nose in this, I'm not expecting this much fruit in the mouth because it doesn't smell that fruity. And yet you get it in the mouth, and there's all of that tropical fruit just rolling over. I did actually have the guys at Cabin tell me they thought it was drinking better now than it was at release, so that's kind of interesting. Now the 88 is lighter. It's certainly prettier. I don't know if it can follow the Cabin. I think the Cabin's just a bigger, chunkier beer. If I had a blindfold on and I wasn't told these were the same beers, I might have said this was like at 6.5% and this was more like 5. That's not a bad thing necessarily. It's wildly lighter. And yeah, I think it might be the yeast, Craig. But it also just might be timing. Good night, Nigel. Aaron, you're not drinking your Love Shack.
I am solely, yes.
Buyer.
Sorry, it was Cabin first or 88?
We started with the Cabin, and then the 88's the second. I want to see what you think of the two side by
What's the
side.
fan favorite around here? It's the 88, isn't it?
Everybody seemed to like the 88,
Yeah,
and
right.
I don't know. This is my first time trying them both. If I don't know, I'll go with the crowd because that seems to be most people around here. Like if somebody comes in and they get this is gonna sound really mean. If they get a 24 pack of Bud Light and then they just pick up the 88 because they think it's better, probably not gonna really think about their opinion. But when really good customers come in and they're like, yeah, I really like the 88, that means something. The Cabin though, for me right now, I'm picking up the Cabin more.
Well, let's try the other one.
And I really wish, Megan, you have such an amazing question about the recipe and everything else, but I really wish I could have gotten better information. I was at both places and posed the question directly, and even sweated them a little. Was like, okay, well, what can you tell me? I was like, not a lot. They were really cagey about it, which was rather worrying because I have to talk about this tomorrow night. I really was hoping I'd get more information on this, but I have very little other than the fact that I have the beers. I promised the beers. I came up with the idea, they'll be able to tell me all about the ways they're different. And then they wouldn't tell me a damn thing. So that's fun.
Just gotta sniff the coffee beans between the two of them, eh? But,
You're on Team 88?
88's got this, just this harshness at the tail end, in the back of your tongue on both sides that doesn't exist with the 88, I find.
I think that's just the bitterness. I think it's just got a little more...
It's not as long lasting,
I wonder if they added the hops earlier or boiled them longer with the Cabin. Because the more you boil hops, the more bitterness and more that back of tongue kind of alpha humulin thing you'll actually pick up. I'm wondering if that's a longer boil on the Cabin, or again, if it might have been whole hops versus pellets. Pellets will, again, tend to give you more bitterness and a little less aroma. But again, most people use pellets just because whole hops are 50% more. They're shockingly more expensive than pellets.
More expensive, yeah.
John and Marina are picking up similar things from both. I mean, they should be similar. They are, in theory, the same beer. And this is a really interesting point. I can kind of tell this story because the brewery doesn't exist anymore, so they can't get mad at me. The original IPA, which eventually became Hoodoo Hops off of Cooley Brew, when I first had that at their launch party, which I got to go to, which was great, I tasted that and I was like, this is such an amazing IPA. This is a license to print money. You guys are going to just do so well with this. And then they really struggled to scale it to their bigger system. And it was just never the same beer. Any IPAs they took off that smaller pilot system or test system, which was, I think, the 10th the size of their standard system, those were always Rockstar. But for whatever reason, they never managed to get their IPAs dialed into that larger system. I know when I was at Bell's in Michigan about 10 years ago, they were talking about the fact that they actually kept their existing brew kettle going while they were basically bringing on stream their new system, because they were upgrading to a system that was about 2 or 3 times as large as their old one. They kept their old system just running continuing to produce beer while they got their new one up on stream, just so that they could get the flavor off the new system exactly like the old. There's a similar thing with single malt Scotch, actually. When they actually go in and replace one of the big copper stills, and these are like room-size copper stills, they'll actually overlay them with a thin sheet of copper, which will be the internal part of the new still. And they'll actually use a very small hammer to duplicate basically every scratch, every ding, every little imperfection on the inside of the copper surface, so the spirit is exactly the same with the new stills. They don't replace them very often. They replace them maybe every 40, 50 years, but they do wear out and they do need replaced. So I did kind of put a caveat on, well, you know, I think the best Pilsner made in Alberta right now is the Tail Gunner Pilsner, the Linton Stevenson. I put a caveat there because it's the best traditional Pilsner, but I don't think there's any real surprise about what my favorite Pilsner is. That's our old friend Part-Time Model, the New Zealand Pilsner from Establishment. And just as happens occasionally, we end up building a little bit of a tasting around a beer I'm excited about, and also a style I'm excited about. So next week, Wednesday night, we are going to do a little bit of a lager and Pilsner tasting from two different breweries. So yes, we are going to do Part-Time Model. We have to. It's just about my favorite lager on planet Earth. Interestingly though, and this is something that I was thinking about sometime last week, somebody came and asked for Pilsners, and I showed them, you know, the Linton Stevenson by Tail Gunner. I showed them the Pontificato. I showed them the Blind Man Pils. And then they left, and Devon's like, oh, you didn't show them the Pilsner? I thought you were like the big Establishment fan. I'm like, you know, I never think about Pilsner, and I don't know why. I think it might be because I love Part-Time Model so much that I've always kind of looked past Pilsner because it's not a Part-Time Model. I dismiss it. But I don't know if I've ever actually tasted it on the channel before, or if I have, I don't remember doing it. So we're going to do Part-Time Model because it's back, and that's the most important beer news to me of the century. And then we're going to do Pilsner because I want to taste it against Part-Time Model and see if, okay, maybe it's just by far the weaker of the two beers, or if I've been a huge unfair bully to it. Now, if you asked everyone else in the store, and I did talk about this with Devon when we got the Part-Time Model back, he was like, oh, I'm glad Part-Time Model's back. I'm like, yeah, the best Pilsner is back. It's like, no, the best Pilsner is Pontificato, and it's not close. So we're going to be doing Pontificato because I really do think this is an outstanding beer. It's an unusual style in a Pilsner, and it's an Italian Pils. Really, really fantastic beer. Really curious to see it against these two as well. And then finally, this is here because, well, oh, you're welcome, Craig. This is here because we sell absolute buckets of it. This is SYC's like Lawnmower beer. This is their clock out lager. And again, normally I don't do just, you know, normal pale lagers, but I have over the last 12 months, as most of you know, really come to appreciate like simple lagers a lot more, especially the care and attention and craftsmanship that goes into making them. So we're going to do clock out lager, probably to start, just to kind of ease us in, and because I want to see how it holds up against three of the best Pilsners in Alberta. And knowing SYC, I'll bet it'll do better than you'd think. So that's next week.
Why do we, maybe a stupid question, why do we call it a lawnmower beer?
Oh, I don't know where the term comes from. I've always heard it thrown around, so I started using it because
Like
I heard it
in
said.
the backyard while doing yard work?
Yeah,
Is
it's
that what
like
we're
it's
talking
like
about?
you're supposed to enjoy it kind of out in the backyard. Don't think about it. Light, you know,
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, milk was a bad choice sort of thing. You don't be drinking like a 12% Imperial Bourbon Barrel Aged Stout, right?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you need something really simple and light.
I see, okay.
Oh, was that the one where you and I did, Craig? That was actually a lot of fun. And yes, I imagine I probably was very argumentative about Pilsner. So we'll get back to that. And you know what? I'm picking up a ton of lemon on this 88, like more than I would have expected. Probably some more 88 there, Aaron.
All right.
Wet your whistle. It's not dry February anymore,
No.
or dry-ish February. Damp February.
Soaked March.
It's not soaked March, actually. Honestly, with this hot weather, I'm surprised I'm drinking as little as I am. Like, it's freaking nice out today.
Real nice. Real nice, Bob.
God, it's so weird hearing my voice about 5 seconds later because Aaron's listening to the video in the background. No, you know what? I'm going to come down as the contrarian here, and I'm going to say no, I like the cabin. I'm just getting more out of the cabin right now. I think it's got more to offer. I think it's a bigger beer. I like that little touch of extra bitterness. I don't know. The 88's kind of, it's lemons and maybe into lemongrass, and I get some of the passion fruit and tropical fruit, sure. I think I'm on the cabin side, and I'll be honest, I didn't expect that considering how much everybody else seems to like the 88. Where's everybody else coming down on this this Love Shack debate? Because I'd love to hear it in the comments. The 88 for Tyler? All right. And Tyler, I'd like to know why, actually. Cabin for David? All right. And again, same thing. Like, tell me why. What wins it for you? And if you don't want to, don't feel obligated. But I am curious what splits the difference for everyone on this. Because for me, I think it's just that the beer feels bigger, richer, maybe a touch sweeter, and I like that little bit of extra bitterness. Yeah, a little fruitier. I think so too. Cabin for Krista, 88 for Dave. John agreed with me. Wow. I think we might have a slight cabin bias for a beer that going in, everybody liked the 88 better, seemingly. I like that it kind of went the other way. That's fun. It would have almost a little disappointing if everyone ended up going the 88 side after it was the better seller. What about you, Aaron? Are you coming down 88 or are you coming down cabin?
I'm still sticking on the 88.
Sticking on the 88 train? Yeah. That's fair. Yeah, I can groove on that. Haven't heard from Craig yet. Or maybe he's just going to say he liked the mild better and just the hell with all of us. That'd be fair too. Cabin times 2 from Craig. I think these should have been brewed on the same... I know they haven't done a second batch at Cabin. Yeah, I got February 22nd of this year for the Cabin, and I got absolutely no information whatsoever on the 88. Thanks, 88. We don't need brew dates because everything we make sells out immediately anyway. Speaking of things that kind of went odd for us, we recently clearanced the Cabin terribly packaged Dominion Days. It was their like one of the beers they made like late summer last year. We kind of had it sitting around. I was like, is it even still good? Do I want to talk about this? Should we just dump it? We opened it. No, it was absolutely fine. Oh. And we ended up blowing it out for like 10 cents above cost. But yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I was surprised how well it held up. This is another thing that was kind of interesting. I think I was talking to Dave at Establishment about this. And he was saying that like their IPAs tend to drink better. It's almost a shame that they're always sold out of Skyrocket because he thinks with like an extra 2 weeks of like, okay, Craig does have a brew date, or maybe he's just better at finding it than I am. But yeah, so the 88's, I guess, a little older, which is odd. That also is probably a canned on date too. Because I know for a fact that 88 has their own canning line, whereas Cabin doesn't. They may have been brewed on the same day, but Cabin couldn't get their canning truck to show up because a heck of a thing. The reason I go on Tuesdays and I don't go Saturdays anymore for beer is actually because all of the new establishment stuff is canned every Tuesday. So when I show up, they've got all their canning equipment everywhere. And it all gets packed up back into the back of that truck and just gone again at the end of the day. But it's quite the system they got going.
Talk about your wine?
Yeah, we will talk about the wine. I was getting there, Aaron. I was getting there. Don't rush me.
Try not to.
No, feel free to rush me. It's kind of your job. So wine tasting this Friday night. One we're going to have a lot more to talk about because, you know, people aren't going to be super stingy on the details like Cabin and 88 were. We're going to do some fun spring wines, and thank goodness it's still nice outside or else no one was going to buy this one. I really like the shift that we see, and we're already starting to see it now, especially today. People in winter, it's like, oh, Kyle, you don't have enough like big high alcohol reds. What are your big reds? We need some Spanish, we need some Australian, we need some Argentine. And then we get into spring, summer, and just everything shifts. We could almost take half the wine bunks in the store and just throw them out and put something different in their place. And we kind of do that to a point. It's about 10% of the store actually changes over. Wine tastes just change almost on a dime the second that the weather gets warm. And all of a sudden, things like the Cottage Kobe and the Chacolina start selling really well. The Cottage Kobe here, this is a Ramato or copper Pinot Grigio from the northeast corner of Italy. This was actually our best-selling wine in 2019. In 2020, it would have been our best-selling wine if we could have gotten enough of it. With the pandemic, especially since it hit in Italy first, or hit really hard in Italy very early, it was in, out, in, out, in, out. And finally, I just got so sick of it. I was like, you know what? Fine. I'm tired of being always out of our best-selling wine. I'm just going to order a pallet of it. So it showed up in Alberta, and I just took 56 cases and said, fine, we're done. This is one of the last 10 cases from that. So the Cottage Kobe is awesome, and I think it's going to be a really fun spring wine. This is something a little older. It's something we've sold for 2 years, but it really is that perfect spring wine. It's just a nice way to get us into the mood for it. Then we're going to move into the Gainsa Chacolina. This is a region that even I hadn't heard of even 2 years ago, and then has really taken off for us. This was a surprise hit for us last summer. We've been working with it over the winter a little bit. I think this is going to be a really big hit for us this summer, and it's a fun story because this is just not a part of Spain you ever talk about. Aaron and I, for Super Maps for Friday, we were going through maps of Spain so we could talk about Spanish wine regions. A huge number of the Spanish wine region maps we looked at online didn't even have this listed as a region, and now it's kind of exploding, which is interesting. For red, we are going to northwestern Italy. We're going to the Langhe. This is a part of Italy that specializes in making big, heavy, well, not heavy, but long-lived, serious reds like Barolo and Barbaresco. This is made at least in part with Nebbiolo, but this is kind of the opposite end. This is what you drink while you're waiting for your 20-year aging Barolos and Barbarescos to come around. It's a light, fresh, easy-drinking wine. And then finally, what I think is going to be the star of the tasting, the cider, that we actually bought the entire market out of. This is by Revel Cider. Revel is by far our best-selling cider maker. This is their brand new Swaff. This is made with strawberries, cherries, and Zweigelt skins, as well as an apple base. I'm not going to spoil it. Just wait till you taste it. I think the last 2 weeks that I've worked here, somebody has come up to me on staff and be like, hey Kai, you want to go halves on a bottle of Swaff? And just everybody here absolutely loves this cider. I've never seen a cider capture people's imagination like this, so I'm really excited to pour it for you. And that is wine tasting next week. And yeah, Spain has so many interesting things going on. Next week? Oh, right, next week Friday.
No, so that's wine tasting next week.
No, that's wine tasting this Friday. Sorry, pardon me. Sorry. Those tech issues early threw me.
Yeah, I get it.
John and Marina split. Any more secrets I can share about the 1 year beer tasting anniversary? What can I share? Well, it's going to be in 5 weeks. It's going to be beer tasting 51 because we skipped 1 week.
The date is the 14th?
I think it's the 14th.
That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, we're going to do April the 14th.
Yeah.
So I can tell you the date now. It's going to be a little different to what we've usually done. Let's just say this. If you like really good value, you might want to get in on that. And that's, this isn't going to be a beer tasting where we make money. It's going to be a beer tasting where I'm going to try and minimize how much we lose on each kit sold. How's that? It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so rankings. This is going to be controversial. I'm going to put the cabin up first. And I'm actually going to follow that with a mild, before I put the 88 in. I actually like the mild sitting right between those two. I love the drink easy. I love that it's 110 calories. I think they did some really clever brewing stuff. But when the same brewery makes a beer like that, that's even lower alcohol, and to my palate is that much better, I don't know. I'm glad it's been such a huge hit for them. For me, it's got to be the Public House. That's absolutely spectacular. Aaron, rankings from you, sir.
I think it's the exact same thing.
But flip the cabins?
Flip the cabins around, yep.
Yeah.
That's,
I don't really... Nobody can tell from that side which is which anyway. The actual brewery name's on the back. But
the one that's crushed is...
the one that's crushed is the cabin.
The cabin, yeah.
And now comes that long 10-second delay while people come in with rankings. Cabin, 88, mild, and then finished. Yeah, nice. I get that. Awesome. Any last questions before we wrap this up, or any last rankings? We don't see anything jumping in the comments in the next little bit. We'll call it a night. So I did kind of give it away a little bit there. We'll have kits available starting tomorrow, but I don't have everything finalized. It's looking like we're going to have sake as our upcoming tasting set for Friday next week, and I'm hoping to be joined by my friend Washi, who is the absolute best sake mind in Western Canada. He runs his own sake import agency. He's like made his own sakes. He's designed stuff. He's an amazing person. I wouldn't want anybody else. Unfortunately, he didn't answer his phone or return my voicemail today, so I can't guarantee he's going to be our guest next week. But I'm sure going to work really hard for it because he's amazing and he's also a super nice guy. So that would be... We will definitely be doing sake. We'll definitely doing 4 of Washi's sakes. I just don't know if he's going to be able to join us. So that is why I didn't really talk about it, is the guest speaker was still tentative. Awesome. Thank you, Craig. Sorry for the tech issues early. This was not our finest hour, but you know, we got through it, and we got through St. Patrick's Day. And thank you, Aaron, for not going to the dollar store and getting me a giant green hat that I've had to be pretend to be happy about doing this in. So, thank you all so much. Thank you, Aaron. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Take care.
What's that, Steve? If you see a faded sign at the side of the road that says 15 miles to the left.
Hey everyone, Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits here to tell you about our upcoming beer tasting on Wednesday, March the 17th at 6 o'clock. Now, if you've been following on with our weekly, we have had back to 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 back brewery profile tastings that I just got getting thrown super cool special guests time and time again, but I haven't had a chance to talk about Shack yet. And I absolutely had to talk about this collaboration because it's A, so good, and B, so much fun.
The whole shack shimmy.
So Cabin and 88, 2 of our favorite breweries, each brewed a Hazy Passionfruit IPA at their own facilities, and we're going to do both of those side by side because this is really the last week I possibly can, because as of the time of filming, this is sold out and this is just about to be. The second half of our little double feature here, we're going to do some low alcohol stuff from Snake Lake. Snake Lake's been doing some really interesting work at lower alcohols. So the Porter here is at 3.4 and the Sip Easy is at 3.9. So we got a little bit of a low alcohol IPA and a session porter. I want to talk a little bit about some of the constraints with brewing low alcohol beers and how you can pack a lot of flavor into a low ABV. So all that and more coming up Wednesday, March the 17th at 6 o'clock. I hope to see you.
It's rusted.
Media Boutique.